hate how they automatically turn on.
Are these numbers, all of these numbers, more or less than they were at the last meeting?
Oh, they're less, but I'll explain why. We're getting our property tax next month. We get the property tax in January.
We have to live
So
stream.
we're always, our high water mark is January, and our low water mark is December.
Okay.
Next month, in fact, probably less than 1 month from now, we will,
Normally people
we'll
sit
be getting
here.
between like $115 and $120 million.
Next
There's a
month?
clicker right here, it looks like.
So,
And we get that, we get a little
Whenever
bit
you
every
talk,
quarter
turn the
too. Hey, good morning, Ken.
How are you?
All right.
very, very little.
Very little,
Mostly
mostly.
all in January.
Most of the big spenders,
Well, everybody's taxes are due December 31st.
but I don't pay, you got till the end of January to pay them,
No, it's really.
without a,
December 31.
but they don't charge you, if you pay it afterwards.
Good, how are
They
you?
don't charge you, a late fee or anything.
Interest accrues after January 30th, 31st, 30th.
Okay.
I think it's.
Well,
No,
we get
they
the
charge
big
it when it hits. I think what he's saying is they charge it when it hits 31st. It's not
I'm gonna put
effective.
these and then I'll.
Wait,
Technically, it's due by December 31st.
December 31st, right?
But if it hits like January 30th, 31st, that's when I believe the interest hit, or whatever fees. I don't remember the fees. I think it's.
Cause I always pay mine after the 31st of December,
Yeah, I mean, you got till like.
the 31st of, January, I believe. Wants me to call, Cassidy's office concerning her disability.
Yeah, I don't, if it's federal, I would, and she's trying to get it.
She's not interested, she's more interested in getting a job, and when
Well, I know,
she
but
has
you gotta get your,
yeah, you might as well do that.
just follow, and if you have to report when you get a job,
Or when you get
yeah,
a job.
just follow.
She can't, seem to comprehend that.
I mean, just this, like a regular PowerPoint
I
presentation.
mean, she's young or something,
No, she's she got hit in the head.
I'll ask him up there that he's switching again, but. this
First
is
come,
just
first
your-
served, Doc.
This is presentation mode, so you can see the next slide coming up, but the display
I'll
should
gladly
have
sit on the
just
other
that
side.
one.
Really don't mind.
Is this my old coffee?
But I mean, that's what that's what your federal delegation's there for, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you, I mean, if you filed it and you're having trouble getting it and
I still think we need a on-air thing right there. So you can just know.
Yes, we're good.
We're good. All right. Thank you, Mr. White. Go ahead.
Okay, so. You're good, thank you. Okay, thank you, Chair. Just, we all have copies of today's Budget Review Committee meeting agenda. We will receive a sales tax update from Ms. Paula Johnson, review timelines of new industrial projects and projected revenues with Mr. White, investment update with our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. White, as well, and then we'll set topics for our next meeting before closing. With that said, Ms. Chair, if it's okay, Ms. White can take the, or Ms. Paula Johnson shall have the first agenda item.
Good morning. I hope y'all had a great weekend and enjoyed the Saints win. Okay, who dat, right? So today, my topics are pretty small and short to the point. I wanted to go over our disbursements for our fiscal year 25, 20.
Now includes the parish government?
Yes, again, we're the sales tax collector for the parish, so most of my numbers always include. We're the sales tax collector for the parish, so most of my numbers always include the whole entire parish. So from
our
a
numbers are
sales tax
3/5.
collection, the $2.5 million is the 5% sales tax. So 60% of that,
So we, I guess, 1.5 million.
yes.
And I would just like to add that for this year's budget, this year's fiscal year budget, I added $5 million of expected additional sales tax revenue. So I think that that comes out to about 7% of an increase for this year. So as you can see, we're running pretty close to what was expected.
Excuse me. And we try to do an analysis of our collections from year to date of our top taxpayers. As you know, we can't really tell you who they are and by name, but we did go through here and list how they're described as in the NAICS description. Our top taxpayers, we actually get 32% from our retailers, and 68% of our sales tax comes from business and industry. The numbers on the right side of the amounts is how they ranked in this year, 2025, as compared to last year in 2024. We do have quite a bit of open litigation. You know, the judges who know me know I only go to court when I know I'm going to win. So it's just bad debts, and the law is pretty clear on those. So here is a list of our cases. It's public information. They're public cases, and where we are. We have a big issue with Hill Corp, a discrepancy or dispute over how we interpret the law. It's not just our parish, it's every parish, and we have an agreement to abide, so we're trying to cut off our legal fees on that one and wait to see how it all plays out in the courts. All right, and I usually do the projections. I do this with the parish every month, and I'm not going to go over the detail like Ronald's going to go over the detail, but we take the LED reports, and then we go through it and see where we are. A lot of times the permits, Ron will go into the deep discussion on this later. A lot of the permits get deferred or postponed or sometimes withdrawn. I wanted to point out the top line item in particular because based on what they filed in their filings, we should have gotten we should have gotten $8 million in taxes, and when we looked at their account, that we only got 1.4. Now, a lot of things happen when they're building these buildings and the machinery and equipment, and I'll go over a little bit detail later on that, but I did want to look at that as a finished product. Now, the first one is one that's 65% complete, and at 65%, we should have about $8 million, but we have only collected 1.4 million. And on all these projects, they order their material and equipment early on, so the bulk of their purchases, their taxable purchases, are at the beginning, and at the end, it's mostly just labor. So it just kind of shows you that while there's an estimated taxes based on what they file with LED, we may not get the money. It may be taxable someplace else. And I did the same thing for the one at the fourth line item. We're 100% complete. It's a smaller dollar amount, but just showing you that we don't always get what it looks like. And, you know, it's not the unicorn. Here's another project. One of them really kind of came out close. We can't tell because they're already currently filing and remitting sales and use tax. So I'm just trying to see what's the difference in the project period. And that one seemed to be pretty on point, the 21149, $14 million project. Any questions? Like I said, Ronald's going to go through this in detail.
Ms. Johnson, you mentioned the previous page. Can you go back to the previous page where the estimated 8.9 and collected 1.4? You said it could be taxed in other ways. Could you give some examples of how it could be taxed in other ways where we wouldn't see it as sales tax?
So a prime example is maybe you need a lot of metal for one of your big facilities building a huge expansion. Well, that metal gets shipped from overseas, ends up at the Port of New Orleans. Well, the sale, the situs of the sale is in Orleans, because that is where title and possession transfer. And so that, I'm not sure if this is the exact taxpayer where that happened, but we did look into it to find out. And those are the big ticket items. Sometimes someone picks up something really expensive piece of equipment or machinery. They further fabricate it or weld in another parish. We've had litigation on that with our neighboring parishes. So it's just never know where title will transfer.
Thank you.
To what
I'm thinking it's not going to go much more than that. Because like I said, the big pieces of equipment now, I'm not sure if we audited this one or not, but we do follow up with an audit when people file a permit or have a project. But the problem is we've got to get there within 3 years or get a waiver. And if we miss that period and we do our best to get it, then we kind of can't get it, especially if they paid it someplace else and maybe it was due here.
Once again, are those amounts parish-wide or just for the school board?
Parish-wide. All my numbers are parish-wide.
Because I expected that we would be getting the amount, that whole amount. Although
I threw that number in on something I was working on before. I didn't know where you were getting your number on yours.
well,
But
the
we'll talk about it.
775 million cost, so I did not want to assume that there would be any, so I did not want to assume that there would be anything additional from that project over and above what we're collecting currently. I was looking more into the future, so I would just say that that's disappointing if there's $7.5 million, perhaps $4 to $5 million that we would expect should be paid to the school board.
Exactly. So we will probably have more meetings. Like I said, we haven't had this many projects in my history. And it's just a lot going on, so we'll have to monitor them and figure it out.
Thank you.
Right. So of these projects, the period extends from 2026 to 2033. The potential sales tax is $250 million. Like it could be, it's a unicorn is what I always say. It's not yours until you get it. And not all sales tax are due in St. Charles, and I kind of gave you a really good example of that, the big expensive pieces of steel. We just have to try to see and make sure that we're getting that money. And the discussion here was the discussion on why we don't get all the money that we want to get. And any other questions?
I'd just like to say for everybody's benefit, at my prior school district, there was I think it was about $10 billion project, liquid natural gas project, that was going to be constructed. And I kept telling everybody, when this gets done, we're going to be getting tens of millions of dollars. I don't know when it's going to happen, but when it does, that's what's going to happen. Now, that occurred and is occurring, since I left there. But in that case, those sales taxes did materialize, and their tax revenues went up into the stratosphere for that reason. So I'm expecting that one particular project where we would have expected a certain amount of sales tax that apparently we're not receiving is an anomaly, that on these other projects, I would expect that those revenues would come to pass.
Yes. So I'm just going back to the analysis of third quarter collections. I put an E here because the E was an error on the taxpayer. We had to refund that money. And then the A is actually an audit. So we do our audits when we do our big plants in these projects do come back millions of dollars. And we do keep the statute of limitations open as long as we can't get to the audit until we can finish it. So.
In that third one, it's not hard to figure out which taxpayer
Okay,
that
I didn't
is.
do that. I should highlight, but anyway.
Huh?
No, I'm just kidding.
So anyway, that third one, we know who the taxpayer is there.
And that was not an error.
That obviously is something we will be counting on, and we'll be talking about that shortly.
Okay. Any other questions? I did want to bring up the legislative session coming up. I've heard over and over and over, and Ray will probably say something to that effect. There's definitely going to be some bills on centralization yet again. It's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's just when it's going to happen. And we just got to keep monitoring that as well. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Mr. White? You have the next agenda item?
Thank you. What I've done is something similar to what Ms. Johnson had done with a list of upcoming projects. And what I wanted to do was just point out and focus in basically on short-term additional revenues that we are expecting. For all of these projects, we will be expecting over the long term a good deal additional revenues in the form of property taxes. Even where there's been an ITEP granted to them, we would still be getting 20% of the additional property tax revenues during the 10-year exemption period, and then followed up with 100% after the 10-year exemption period. So long-term, there's a great deal of revenue that we're expecting. But what I really wanted to focus on, because this will be important for us over the next 12 months to 24 months, is additional sales tax revenue. That will be one-time revenue. We'll get it during the construction period, and it will then basically go away. But what this can do is help fund the operations of the school board, any new additional initiatives going on with the school system in the short term, as well as rebuild our fund balance that has gone down because of the construction that we've been doing in the parish that the district has paid, that the general fund has paid for. So the first, and I'm going to ask Ms. Johnson to, Ms. Johnson will be able to perhaps elaborate on some of these projects. I just want to go through each of them. We've also reached out to Mr. Patrick Beard with the parish government, and he's been communicating with me, as well as Ms. Johnson, on information that he's gathered in terms of these projects. The thing that I'm most interested in really is the start dates for these projects, because that'll be very important to us. So the first one is the St. Charles Clean Fuels Project. This total project cost comes from the various applications that they have submitted. Let me take a look at this. I didn't want to put all this information and crowd up the spreadsheet. There are two that were ITEP applications, which the school board approved, but there's also a third particular application. I think that's through the quality jobs process. So the total of all three of those is the $8.8 billion that we're seeing on this spreadsheet. Additionally, I knew that there was going to be about $400 million worth of work being done at IMTT to provide the infrastructure that St. Charles Clean Fuels will need. That we are expecting to occur early on. However, on the information that Mr. Beard has provided us, he did not include any additional work at IMTT, so I'm thinking that that may be included in this particular line item for St. Charles Clean Fuels. So I did not include that one separately. Now, the start dates that they have provided in the applications through the ITEP program and the Quality Jobs program range from April 1st, 24. Let's see, we have April 1st, 24, April 1st, 2025, and April 1st, 2026. Well, to my knowledge, they haven't really started on any of those yet. So I don't know if Mr. Gregson or Ms. Johnson have any additional thoughts, insights as to when these may be getting underway. The last I heard was that they had not yet made the so-called FID, final investment decision. And I also don't know if they've received all of their permits. I know that they recently received something, I think, from the parish, so maybe Mr. Gregson can give us some insight on that.
They received their air permit. So if you spoke at the meeting or submitted anything, you got a card back. I just confirmed it. Or all the four of these, are these numbers from the LEDs fast lane?
I think so, yes.
Okay, yeah. Okay, because this, if you remember, this St. Charles Clean Fuels was 4.6 billion when we approved it in '23. It's now over at 8. So they've updated.
Well, the two ITEPs
Correct.
added up to that. That was the information that was provided to the school district.
Total project, right.
Right.
Quality jobs is a duplicate of the ITAP because it's a different program. So I usually delete that.
Yeah, the quality jobs is something that you had to submit by June 30th.
We don't add quality jobs.
Oh, well, I appreciate that because,
The quality jobs had to be submitted by June 30th of 2025, which they did. That ended June 30th of '25. It's now the high impact wage.
so perhaps
Jobs.
Mr. Beard's spreadsheet duplicated.
But the cost of materials is where the sales tax comes from. I mean,
And it should also come from the building, but I took that out because I'm like, where's all this money?
yeah, I mean, I don't know when
Pay
those,
it probably.
I don't know when the sales tax arrives based on when shovel hits the ground, so I don't know that. I don't know that window, like when, how long after, but I know that, you know, if things continue to, the reason these things are delayed, just so you know, like, you see a date and then it's delayed, and then when I say delayed, I mean, it could be a year, 2 years. Obviously, what we're looking at here is, it's a permitting process. It's the hangup that, at all levels, so, it's just not efficient. And that's why you're seeing it, but they are moving forward. I do know that. Yeah.
Offline and see if
Yeah.
you're able to provide some more insight
Yeah,
on
we'll
that
see.
and check on that. Obviously, that's the biggest one of the new projects. I'm sorry?
Your numbers are good.
Do you want to go to the last one? Because that's 2026. That's this year. I mean,
Yes.
next year, sorry.
Yes, that'd be fine.
They'll be breaking ground on Waterford 5 is first and expected to be completed by 29. Waterford 6 is expected to be completed by 2030.
And obviously with these privately funded projects, they don't have the same transparency requirements that a public entity would have. They are able to operate pretty much on their own in a manner that, you know, suits them, subject to getting the permits and whatnot. So they may announce something, but not necessarily follow what their announcement is. And as I was describing to somebody the other day, you never know if they may start making purchases of materials, then have their official groundbreaking ceremony. Or they may have their official groundbreaking ceremony and then wait a few months before they actually start buying the materials. That's something that they will do subject to their own, you know, business needs. So if they are starting in calendar year 2026, that's obviously very good. And the number that has been, I believe, announced by them and the number that has generally been used is $3 billion for those two new power plants.
So their start date is in 26.
So that would obviously be great for the school system in terms of having new revenues over the next 12 months. And you can see what the new tax revenues would be over the whole construction period for just the school system, which would be $27 million estimate. And that's based on 30% of the total project cost being for the materials and supplies and machinery and those items which would be taxable for sales tax purposes. And then the $27 million would be the school board's share. Now, if we go up to the second one, Shell Chemical is, let me see, I'll describe what that. They're expanding and have plans to improve, upgrade, and electrify equipment at the facilities of the Norco complex. The project will also include major unit turnarounds and new catalyst products, and it is an expansion. So that particular project, through the quality jobs program, is just under $1 billion. And the start date and end date for those two, start date of July 1st, 2025, and end date of December 31st, 2027. I think if those dates turn out to be correct, then calendar year 2026 should help, you know, we should see a good deal of additional revenue. And looking at Ms. Johnson's schedule from a couple of minutes ago, there was a particular chemical, I think a category chemical plant that seemed to have a good deal of increase. So it'd be great if they are working on that now, and we would end up seeing some additional revenues for that particular project. Total estimate between $8 and $9 million. And then the third one, Valero Services, while there is, I have here Valero Refining, a smaller amount which may actually be going on now. The one I did focus on was Valero Services, which is total project cost of about $1.5 billion. And various expansion and improvement projects to increase plant capacity and throughput. Additional machinery and equipment necessary for expansion include a whole number of things. And so those.
And they do their business transactions, like they order their equipment or products. Would that affect St. Charles Parish?
I'll let Ms. Johnson address that.
Thank you. Yes, the taxes due when it gets transferred into the parish, regardless of who purchased it for them. But that is the tricky question. We're finding that some of our facilities may be owned by another corporate headquarter, like the real property, a corporate entity outside the state. And so when we're doing an audit of a plant, we'll ask for the location financials. And hopefully, they're all there. I mean, it's sometimes is a little difficult to make sure that we're getting everything. But for the most part, you know, we look at the transactions for that entity and what comes in and out. So are we, from a, we just have to make sure we get the entities and understand the corporate structure, and that is definitely the hardest part at the very beginning of an audit, to make sure we know who owns what at the facilities.
I'll ask a quick question of Ms. Johnson, because we had talked about this, and as we saw on that schedule a few minutes ago, a particular nuclear power plant in St. Charles Parish, who we will not name, has paid a good deal more in sales tax for this current fiscal year. Do you have any way of knowing if that is related to new construction? Or is that something you can disclose?
All I could tell you is that the numbers were correct, and we did confirm that we don't have to give them a refund. I think. Yeah, so whether it's an old or a new project, I am not sure.
I'll just say this, just because I know they had closed during this fiscal period, they had finished a turnaround as well, and they had replaced the main engine, I believe.
So it may not be related to new
I do not think it was,
construction.
I mean, just in my
It
general
can't,
opinion.
so it would not have been related to their expansion of 5 and 6, because they needed a variance that was approved in October. And if they, you know, they wouldn't have started like, right, it was related to a turnaround of the existing facility, nothing new.
In a newspaper article recently, it mentioned that while there was a groundbreaking ceremony in North Louisiana for the 2 new power plants in Richland Parish, or at least to serve the new Meta facility that Entergy was going to build, it mentioned that the 2 plants, sometimes they call it one plant only because they're decommissioning one, so it's a net of 1 new plant, but it's actually 2 that they're constructing. It mentioned that there were still permits to be had or obtained before they could break ground. But I've also heard that they had all the permits that they needed. So I don't know if Mr.
So
Gregson
Energy
has.
Waterford 5, so they're building Waterford 5 and Waterford 6. Waterford 5 is being built to power one of the units, to power Meta. Don't know what percentage of their power, but it's a large portion. That's where St. Charles gets the benefit on the sales tax, on the tax side, not, well, sales tax to build out, but ad valorem, the fact that it's here. Waterford 6 is power for everything else. So it's 2029 projected for Waterford 5 to come online. Waterford 6 is 2030. And that's public, you know, information, not shared.
Right. So what I'm going to do is work with Ms. Johnson and Mr. Beard and Mr. Gregson, and just so we can keep an eye on these things, because this will be important to us, and we'll be able to update you as we move along with any important news on these projects.
I have a question, Mr. White. Just looking at it, it seems like this would be the max earning potentials, but then knowing on the previous slides when Ms. Johnson had shared that doesn't actually always play out the way that we think it does, how do we factor that in our projections then moving forward?
The best we can do is the best we can do. So these projections are based on the best information we have now and what we expect based on what has occurred in the past for these types of projects. As far as that one particular project where it didn't seem to pan out the way it was expected, I have no way of commenting on that, but I would say that I had expected more from that particular project. But that's something Ms. Johnson and I can talk about over time and see if there is something that is, if they are in fact underpaying what they should be paying us. but I did not factor in what is occurring on that particular project in the estimates for these projects. Because these projects and these estimates align with what I have seen in my experience over a number of years, how these projects tend to work. And it, like I said, it also aligns with the way the project in Plaquemines Parish has occurred and other similar type projects around the state that I've seen, including in a parish where they don't have sales tax and missed out on a whole lot of potential revenue for a liquid natural gas plant. So, but needless to say, we'll be keeping an eye on these things as the months go along and see what develops.
I'll add that, and not specific on that one up here on the wall, but kind of what I alluded to with water. A lot of these projects will have, such as St. Charles Plain Fields, if remember, there was 2 trains. So first one, second one, same thing with what, sometimes one is the permitting piece, and the permitting, not just the length and the not burdensome, just the lack of efficiency in the permitting, but sometimes the permitting might only approve part 1 and then not part 2, right, of it. So that's why sometimes I think it is important to have those discussions with the people who are working with that project to say, hey, I know the whole project is X, but what part are we doing first? What part are we doing second? And then kind of you can dive into those numbers to see. I think that's just keeping your finger on the pulse, I guess. Yep.
Mr. White, I know it's not part of this report, but when it comes to ITEPs, are there any businesses that are coming off ITEPs in the next few years?
The number, I haven't looked at the particular projects, but I seem to recall like about $250 million of cost. Yeah, $250 million worth of projects that will be coming off for basically a year from now, when that will come into play when the board selects the property tax millage to assess in July of 2026, about $250 million worth of projects. That amount will be depreciated because that was the original cost. It will probably be approximately $150 million worth of new projects. The degree to which that affects our property tax rolls is hard to say because there will be a lot of other pluses and minuses involved. But the amount that I'm expecting for this coming year to come off the property tax rolls will not be nearly as great as a couple of the recent years where we had like about $1.5 billion and I think $2.5 billion worth of projects that had come off about, I think it was like 2 to 3 years ago. So while I'm expecting something and some increase perhaps, it's not, I don't expect anything to be dramatic over the next year.
I'd like to go back to the case of where they take another look at that and monitor that. Okay.
Yes.
Because that's a big difference.
If there are no more questions on that topic, we can move to the next agenda item, which is a review of the investments. At our last meeting, I had told the committee that we were at about $60 million at that time, and I said that that's a small or a low amount for us. And there's not too many places where you can say that $60 million is a low amount. But compared to where we had been maybe the year before or 2 years before, it was low for that time of the year. And so as of last week, we were between $23 and $24 million. And we're going to be receiving another $10 million of revenue between now and the end of the month. And then probably the second week of January, we'll be receiving probably between our total property tax revenue should be about $115 to $120 million that we'll be receiving in January. So every year, just from a cash flow standpoint, January is always our high water mark and December is our low water mark. So taking a look at this and realizing where we are, and a lot of this is because of all the new construction that we've done, you know, spending down our fund balance, so to speak, for this building, as well as the AAA alumni centers and the other projects that have been going on that were not funded with the bond proceeds. And there are some that we'll be constructing over the coming year that the board has recently approved at the last couple of board meetings. So we'll be keeping an eye on this just from a cash flow standpoint and see how things develop over the year, especially in light of projected new revenues and when those start to materialize over the next 12 months. But this is where we are currently, at least as of last week, in terms of our investments. And once we receive the property tax revenues that will be put into these investments to earn some interest. Interest rates are going down a little bit because the Fed's been cutting rates. But a big part of that in terms of the revenues we can generate is really just based on how much we're able to put in the investment. So the more money we have, obviously, the more money we can earn. The interest rate itself is not as important as the amount of money we can actually put into the investments. And right now, the LAMP rate is just a shade over 4%, and what we have in meter is about 4.12%. So we will obviously continue to avail ourselves of those opportunities in order to earn some interest as much as we can. Those amounts go up and down throughout a month, and generally will go down from January through December just because of the timing of the property tax revenues that we receive. Any questions on the investments?
I want to touch on, once we get the property tax revenue that's invested in the various accounts, is there any formula to, as far as the percentage that what accounts they go to?
I appreciate you asking that. Now that you've triggered my memory, I spoke with our investment advisor at Meter. We had one of our regular meetings about every quarter or so, and just talk about what the conditions are in the investment world and what we may be able to do and what opportunities would be best for us. And we spoke last week, and he thinks that commercial paper, which is a basically short-term loan by private companies, that is an area that we have invested about maybe a year or two ago. That is an area that we are allowed under the law to invest in. These companies are basically AA, AAA rated, so there's very, very little risk. But oftentimes those rates are a little bit higher. He was suggesting that we see what we can put aside once we receive those property tax revenues, what we would not need, let's say, for a 6-month period. And he was thinking 6 to 9 months would be the ideal. Now, I appreciate it because it was a very logical question that I was even thinking of discussing, but it slipped my mind. Thank you.
We'll learn it.
Any other questions on that topic?
Okay, that takes us to the next agenda item, which is set topics for the next meeting. This is what I currently perhaps suggest. Since we did just have that discussion on the ITEPs, could we maybe have the ITEP schedule
Yes, sir.
presented?
In fact, I just worked on putting a lot of those numbers in our yearly financial report that's being prepared right now. So I remember those numbers having been provided to us by the assessor's office because they were required to be included in that. So that's something I can definitely provide. Thank you.
And when are we looking at meeting?
Oh, the date?
Just approximate date.
Mr. White?
And the reason I ask
Date
is I didn't know how the timeframe of legislation is going to play into that, you know.
March 9th is first day of session.
So this meeting would probably be before the legislation really kicks in.
My apologies for not having looked into that. Let's see, when,
February, typically.
yes, we do have a date, February 23rd.
February 23rd. And kind of tied to that legislation piece, I know for the election, I believe it's Amendment 2 will be proposed relative to the removal of the protection on those funds and the associated payoff of the accrued liability for the teacher retirement system. So perhaps an update on the impact of Amendment 2 on our budget and what we would see as the result from the savings for the paying down of the accrued liability, and what would be entailed there for this committee to know.
That sounds great. I think it would not come into play for a whole other year, but it's something, if, you know, just something to look at on the horizon, that if it passes, what would the effect be?
Budget forecast, sales tax update, investment update, update to industrial projects like you had today. The only other topic I've thought about is just because I continue to see these project updates relative to previous claims with FEMA, relative to Hurricane
thank you.
Ida and/or the closure of the Katrina sub. We haven't discussed that in a while, but I continue to see updates from that standpoint. Are there any other topics from committee members or Chair, Ms. Chair?
I would leave the industrial, because you're gonna get updates every 3 months. You'll have something more and more.
I'm sorry?
I'd keep the industrial stuff on there.
Oh, okay.
Just because we'll, especially some of these, you'll know more and more as you keep going, because there's multiple pieces to each project, so.
Okay, any other suggestions for topics? Okay, and then the last agenda item is just what worked for today's meeting.
The handouts and the presentation, the presentation that Paula did on sales tax that was available on the PowerPoint.
Okay, any even better ifs? Madam Chair, or? Yeah, that's it, that's the meeting.
Move to adjourn.
All right.
I'll second.
I move to adjourn and he'll second. Yeah, there you go. Your chair, I move to adjourn, he seconds.